Welcome, everybody, to the Harder Not Smarter podcast. Our next guest is a man who can turn visions into a reality like no one I've ever seen. He started the Honor Foundation, a premier special operations transition organization that helps SEALs and other special operators figure out their next purpose in life as they leave the military. He's now the founder and managing partner at BVVC, a venture capital firm focused on the national defense space, an area that's seen a renewed interest as we realize the limitations of the traditional defense industry and their lack of innovation. I've known him since I was a fellow at the Honor Foundation and have been inspired since I first saw his infectious desire to create positive change in the world. So please, everyone, welcome Joe Muscleman to the Harder Not Smarter podcast.
Hey, Kevin, how are you? Greg, hello.
I'm doing great.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, great to be
here. I'm super
here.
excited to have you on. But the elephant in the room topic is you had Admiral Bill McCraven on as your first guest on your own podcast, the TLC Equation. So I have to ask, what is this podcast about, and what is it like having that man's undivided attention for 2 hours?
Yeah. So, well, one, he's a remarkable leader. So I want to thank you two for being leaders and allowing me to talk a bit with you guys here today. I'm super grateful for that. Everyone's a bundle of stories. So when I have the opportunity to pass on some of the stories that have impacted me, that's always a very meaningful experience. So I'm grateful. Thank you. So what was it like to have Admiral McCraven's undivided attention? Well, I think if anybody has spent quality time with Admiral McCraven, he only knows how to give his undivided attention. So it was remarkably focused. We've known each other for nearly a decade, and I was very happy and grateful with the outcome of that episode. We could talk for hours. And even before we had the podcast, he came to Chicago to talk a bit about his book, and again was very gracious with his time. I asked him to meet after his talk a couple weeks in advance, and he sat there post his talk for nearly 4 hours with me, my mother, my father, and a senior advisor to BVVC, who was also there, a very close friend and mentor, someone named Brett Paskey. And we sat at University Club for the entire evening and just talked about life and liberty and the great pursuits. And so it was great. It was. The podcast has been a lot of fun. For me, I always hope people find mediums that suit their skill sets. And so for me, I'm literally on calls all day with founders, with investors, with LP prospects, with other folks like yourself that are builders and doers. So I find myself talking a lot. And so the medium for me, at least in this early stage of my, investor career over the last, 6 years or so, 5-6 years, I do find myself talking a lot about the vision of the fund, the mission of the fund, of course, backing founders and supporting them on advising calls and board calls and customer calls. And so writing isn't really there for me yet. I do write often, but every evening I write a lot of different thoughts that I have from the day. There's the rule of 3 in my house, and I started to execute this with my son early. What are the 3 things that you felt impacted your emotions today? And that's the question I ask him. And so for me, it's the same question as an adult. What are the 3 things that seem to shift your emotions today? Dig in, figure out what they were, and then ask yourself why you had the reaction that you did. It's a great exercise in just remaining present. But the podcast, just to do a callback to your question, I am in the mode of talking and, sifting through ideas and surgically digging into ideas verbally with other experts and subject matter experts. And then at the end of the day, I write about it. So I'm not I don't have 3 to 5 hours a day to sit down and write. Certainly hope to be able to do that soon. But right now, let's talk. Let's get people on the calendar and let's learn about what they're building. So that was the purpose of the podcast.
Yeah, really create a catalog of
that's right.
Ideas and concepts and sharing them with other people so that they can take part in it. It's not just when you journal, it's great. But until you publish it, it's very restricted to just you, and you can't really get your ideas out there. But podcasts,
that's right.
It's such a easy medium to express and share.
That's right. Yeah, and it's quick and simple, and I have a great team, of like 12 people that sit behind the scenes and watch it and review it. And I doubt that episode 1 will look anything like episode 50 by the end of the year, because we're getting so good at the post-production stuff, and luckily I just kind of have to show up, and the team really does a great job on pre-production. So I'm happy with the way things are going.
That's awesome. Yeah. So tell me about your conversation with him. I mean, he's a remarkable, inspiring human being. Everyone has read his books. Everyone's seen his videos, but they want to know more about who he is as a person and how he is thinking through ideas in real time.
Yeah. So I would say this: the main content of that particular conversation, I asked him what he wanted to talk about, and it's something I usually ask folks that are coming on the pod. But the one thing that I selfishly wanted to talk about was his new book, and for me, even the title, Leadership Lessons Made Simple but Not Easy, that defines every leadership decision I've ever had to come across. It is simple. Traditionally, I would say that most people absolutely know the right answer, and there's very few things actually that come across our desk where we don't know what the right direction is to take. We get clouded by the opinion of others, I think, that kind of can miss and can change the course, that can course correct our initial intention from a leadership direction. But that's, for him, it's simple, and anybody that can describe a leadership lesson that's obviously very complex simply, that they're brilliant, they understand it, they've lived it. And so for me, that conversation was a great opportunity to dig into different chapters of the book, which I was, the ones that impacted me most. One of which is a chapter for your audience. You should go get that book for sure. It's a New York Times bestseller, Leadership Lessons Made Simple but Not Easy. And there's a chapter in there that talks about the shepherd should smell like his sheep. And without having to really discuss much about that chapter, I think everyone on this conversation, listening to this conversation, knows what that's supposed to mean. And he would talk about walking the lines of, troopers and checking in on personnel and living and breathing that almost as a value. Value should inspire action, and just that phrase alone inspires actions to go and get to know your folks. So speaking with him is very candid, and he's a very real person doing very real work in the world. So I appreciate him, and we're also very proud to welcome him as a founding faculty member of the Schoolhouse, which is launching for our fund here in April. So it's coming up in the next 30 days.
What is the Schoolhouse?
Pardon me. Yeah. So
very good.
So I started investing in national security in 2019, was when I first had my eyes set on a company that was focused on supply chain and logistics. And luckily, we were in early on that particular company right before COVID. And as both of you know, our supply chains were drastically impacted by the COVID outbreak. So getting to know that side of that business early really started to pay more attention to broader themes in national security. And I think that's one of the major themes I find myself talking about most with investors is defense is different than national security. Deterrence is different than defense. So it's evolved quite a bit. So defense and national security are no longer things that just go boom. They're not just about hardware. They're not just about building physical things that are intense manufacturing, have intense manufacturing to them. It's a big part of it. But there's, we have 13 different verticals at our fund, which all focus on national security. And so what I recognized is, I don't want to jump around too much. I'm sure we're going to talk about this at some point, but my initial passion came from building a schoolhouse that you're very familiar with, Kevin, because you attended it, you went through it, you lived it, you breathed it. You were able to walk into a physical space and place that was dedicated to you and those like you, which was, for the folks that are listening, it's called the Honor Foundation, or honor.org. We now have 10 campuses around the country, all kind of centrally located, geolocated strategically, where special operators exit their service, and we've become the premier transition institute in the country, career transition institute for the special operations community. That was like the beginning of a very strong passion for me to build a physical place and a structure where people could come and meet, and where every resource, every person, every butt in every seat had a purpose to support the fellows of that program. And I saw what happens when you focus a guided impact into an individual and what they can do with that, especially folks like yourself. Like, the Schoolhouse didn't need to be created to inspire anyone from this community. You don't need to inspire the already inspired. They've got that covered. But to build a place that housed a compass for them, and they could give them an unfair advantage. And to me, I'm, the old saying going through buds, as you know, Kevin, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So that doesn't change when you go to transition.
That's the truth.
It's the truth. So for us, we wanted to give them an unfair advantage as they were making their transition and accelerate certain education at a time when it mattered most for the operators of the special operations community when they were in that state of transition. So think of, fast forward to, the love that I have for the special operations community, started to invest in national security and now launching, BV. We recognized pretty quickly that there were two gaps that needed to be covered. And these are I don't have like a Mattis answer to this question, what keeps you up at night? I can't answer that question the way that he did, but the way that I answered this question for nearly 5 years was, where is the fund in the field for special operations command? Meaning, if you were to walk around the agency or the CIA and you were to ask anybody, hey, is there like a venture fund out in the field that supports technology initiatives on behalf of the agency and maybe other three-letter institutions? And without hesitation, they would say, yeah, InQtel. Like, without hesitation, it's InQtel. But yet when you would walk around the command structure, actually, JSOC, CENTCOM, SOCOM, and you would say, hey, is there a venture fund in the field that focuses on technology initiatives specific to the operator? And there would be kind of a shoulder shrug and like, no, not really. Not one that comes to mind. And so just as I asked that same question, Kevin, in 2012 into 2013, transitioning from the Navy into the private sector, when I was asking, is there a transition institute that exists for the special operations community? And no one gave me a good answer, right? And a couple of people would say, well, there's this one thing that's been around for a while, but I don't think it's specific to special operations. I got all those same spidey senses over the last 5 years when I was asking people, is there a fund in the field in venture capital that is laser focused on supporting the special operations community and their technology needs? And the answer was no. It wasn't even like, oh, there's some folks that do defense and that, but no one with a laser focus in their charter, PPM, LPA, that focuses specifically on special operations into the broader defense and the commercial sector partners that matter in that order. There was not a fund that does that. So that got me thinking over the last couple of years, I want to do that. They need it. And then I started to, focus test and beta test the idea, SOCOM all the way up to the head shed, all the way down to the operator. And so now there is something that is going to be launching this year. We're already 6 investments deep into Bravo Victor Venture Capital, which is focusing specifically on that. Now, the second question that kept me up at night is, where is the Y Combinator for national security? Like, why doesn't that exist? Right? So where's the accelerator for NatSec companies in this country? And again, everybody would like head nod with affirmation, be like, yeah, like where is that? I don't know why that isn't a thing. Well, there's a historical answer to this question that would take, a fifth and a fire for us to get through. But and it's like a serious fire pit session on the historical response to this. But after I did, enough conversations, and you know me, I love talking about listening tours. And so the listening tour that I went in the direction of the fund Well, last year we filed the paperwork. I was already, into a fund one. It was a $55 million strategy, fully deployed. I'm ready to do the next fund. This is the one that I wanted. This is the strategy that I wanted to focus on. But it needed to be paired with something unique. And so January of last year, I filed paperwork, got it done, onboarded, the initial financial contributors. We had some very generous families that contributed $150,000 out of the gate. I matched their gift, and now boom, we've got it. So now we had to create a schoolhouse, and this from your experience in the SEAL teams, and Greg, you as well. Schoolhouse has a double meaning for folks from the community, right? It has a double meaning for folks that are coming from special operations. And the name meant a lot to me. And I wanted to create a true schoolhouse where we are learning real live tactics in the moment. I went on a listening tour in the direction of YC founders, figured out what they really pulled from that experience. Like, what was if you could boil down the lessons that you took away while your time at YC, which everyone raved about. So they're doing a phenomenal job. And selfishly, I could never duplicate or replicate that experience. I don't want to. It needs to be a little different for this community of builders. And so what I pulled together is a 7-week accelerator experience that focuses on 3 major themes to accelerate the journey of national security founders, which is capital, customers, and community. Those are the 3 things that everyone universally told me they absolutely took away from their experience at YC. And by the way, in that order, right? So they first gave them initial capital, right? Then they push strong towards first customers and first customer traction. And then they are opened up into this broader community and ecosystem. So all I did was listen carefully to nearly 50 YC founders over the last 2 years, pulled the lessons. And now it's funny because as soon as, GPT came onto the marketplace, immediately I, had the early beta, started, understanding how this could be useful to us. And then I was able to take all of my scripts and transcripts from all those listening tours and conversations, put them all into one channel and tell me what the recurring themes are. And GPT told me, here are the recurring
GPT
themes.
is such a powerful thing, and people
Oh,
find
it's amazing.
incredible ways to leverage it. This is a
an
new one for me, but it's great.
No, it's a total amplifier, right? And it saved me a lot of reviewing. And all I did was copy paste all the conversations, pages and pages, hundreds of pages. I said, please summarize, the main themes that were coming out of this. And then I saw it very clearly what it was. Highlight these, create me a 1-pager, all this stuff. And then it eventually was like, this is it. This is exactly right. Because I heard it, during the conversations. And so what's been produced now is that our fund makes investments at the speed of investing. So this is how we're different than YC in a lot of ways, where YC does a batch, right? And that batch goes into the 6-month experience or the 4 to 6 month experience that is YC. Our fund will invest at the speed of investing. So we will invest at the traditional pace of what a normal venture fund does. Our investments will then go to Schoolhouse. And it's a 7-week experience. And the first week is in person. We created it as a separate entity, as a 501c3. A 501c3 can interact differently with, the government and command structures and all these different things. And so the fund is over there. And then our nonprofit that is co-sponsored and backed by other funds, other firms, other founders, and a totally separate selection committee. And we have an entirely separate faculty. And Admiral McCraven is our founding faculty at Schoolhouse. And his first week is called 21st. What he's teaching will be a fully produced masterclass production of 21st century leadership, ethics and morality and decision-making for 21st century founders. Part of my reason for getting into national security is, there's really 3 world superpowers, and one might be unseen to most or unrecognized by most. I talked about this at South by Southwest last year. There's a political philosopher, geopolitical economist, I guess I would say, this guy named Ian Bremmer, and he brought this up many years ago, and it really got me focused on this as a problem set. It's a wicked problem where, yes, when we think of superpowers, we think of state actors typically, right? But there's a third superpower that's been brewing for decades. And now it's really coming to a head as we watch the news and we follow economists and the work that Sam Altman is doing and what Microsoft is doing and even some of my founders and what they're building. That technology founders in the 21st century in aggregate are a superpower to themselves. And if you think of them as a superpower, then that means that the moral fiber and ethics coming into this next generation of national security founders needs to be different. They need to have a different understanding of the world. They have to operate by a certain moral compass, ethical compass, and set of principles and guidelines. So I feel like VC needs to take in this qualitative aspect to diligence very differently than they've had to take into consideration in the past. If you were to gather up these founders in aggregate and they make up a global superpower in the way they decide and make decisions around their companies and their technology, we have to take that very seriously in VC, which is why Schoolhouse needed to become a place where we can send folks. And I would like the first personality that they come into contact with to be someone like an Admiral McCraven. So it was all done very much by design, on purpose, for a purpose. And the entire experience at Schoolhouse will focus on that almost as an overlay on every single thing that we teach is about the importance of ethics and morality.
So is there any other fund or organization out there creating something like this where we're actually trying to almost teach founders how they should be running their businesses? I mean, you essentially get these founders that come in from all walks of life, from all value systems, from all character traits, and they step into the arena as an idea leader or a thought leader, and there's no standardization behind it. There's no guiding principle other than essentially they're investors in a lot of cases on how they should conduct business. Is there anything else out there like this?
Well, I want to be super clear about this. Founders are mission-focused founders are incredibly driven and self-oriented and self-correcting individuals. So I would like to say that every single founder in my portfolio I'm very proud of are guided by a certain moral compass, because one of our qualitative measures at the fund when it comes to diligence is, of course, focused on what I call the TLC Equation, which is what the podcast is based on. That there are these 5 driving forces across every business that's uniform, that focus on vision, mission, values, principles, and ethos or character, right? So those are 5 driving forces that you can find inside any business. It doesn't matter what it is. And the business in startups stems from the founder. So really the founder, you just had your first baby, Kevin. So you're a new founder and you've created this thing, right? And you don't, when you first create it, you don't really know, you're looking at it and, you don't know what it is. It's like this new life that you've, brought into the world. And the entity itself, or the baby for this matter, it doesn't know what words to use. It can't really talk. It can't like walk or run yet. It's just kind of there. And then slowly the baby, like a business, gets up and crawls and walks and runs and starts to use words and starts to figure out what it likes to look like. It's exactly like a business. So I'm so glad that God blessed me with a baby per fund, that I've been able to launch a baby alongside a fund, because they're identical in how that they're initially created, right? So the best founders in the world have an exceptional moral compass. They have, they know what they're doing. And a hard truth, I want to be clear. When you ask, are there other institutions that are doing this? There's a lot of accelerators. There's probably dozens. This is not an accelerator. This is a schoolhouse. And so in the earliest stages of a company's business, they're specifically in national security, there are lessons that if, the classic, like, if I would have known this, then this would have happened differently, right? So we've been paying very close attention to that as as far as capital is concerned, there's not sophisticated frameworks that are offered up to early stage founders in the national security space that I can literally teach them in 2.5 hours. This is very much, we've broken up every course with a strategic faculty and then a tactical faculty, right? So imagine, for instance, like let's just use an example. I'm not saying that this person is faculty. I'm just saying that this is, an example of what a strategic faculty would look like. So like Palmer Luckey, let's use Palmer, for example. Palmer gets up there for an hour in a fireside chat. The 5 weeks in between the in-person experiences at our Schoolhouse are virtual. So you would imagine Palmer coming on, having a fireside for 60 minutes, and I'm going to ask very specific questions about how he did what he did. Then we translate those lessons from the strategy to the tactical. All right, so once Palmer leaves the virtual stage, we then have a tactical faculty that walks our founders and other founders, because we're not just inviting our founders to attend Schoolhouse. We want this to be a truly co-founded, collaborative opportunity for NatSec founders who are out there to build faster. And so this won't just be BV founders. We want founders from other funds that are focused on national security to join us as they go through as they go through the curriculum. But then you have to imagine a tactical faculty member giving frameworks, handing over checklists. Here's what he just talked about, and here's how you actually do that. Right? So that is what is typically missing with founders, and it plays so nicely into the power of TLC Equation, because TLC Equation, you have the vision, right? The thing we imagine and hope to achieve alongside others. That's the flagpole on top of, the mountain. And then you have the mission just above the surface, our worthy and just cause. It's what we do every single day, why we put our feet on the ground. When you go beneath the surface, how we think, act, feel, and communicate into the world. Those are values that have to inspire action, right? So like founders are great at that. But when it gets to what is John doing Monday morning at 8 a.m., there's this gap that exists, right? I'm very clear on the vision, but what do I have to do? What are all the baby steps from this moment to that vision that I have to accomplish? And I can create a framework no different than Waypoint. So for the folks listening, the initial curriculum that we created at the Honor Foundation was translated into now what we call Waypoint. Waypoint definition is a singular place on a journey. Just like a fellow, a member transitioning from the special operations community, is no different than a founder, a place on their journey. So we're an early seed investor. We want to get founders that are early in their journey. There are certain lessons that I've pinpointed along with the fund expertise and industry-wide that if they knew these lessons on how to navigate this sooner, it would have changed things. If we can change things at the earliest stages, we can accelerate the entire sector especially for the founders that we know we want to win, right? Because it is about winning. It's about investing in founders that are going to build enormous businesses and are going to win on behalf of national security and our allies. So I wanted to create a central place.
So what type of businesses do you see ideally fitting into this? I know the national defense space is huge. There's so many different areas that you mentioned. There's the physical products, there's the airplane builders, the tank manufacturing, stuff like that. There's the cyber warfare, computer-centric side. There's emerging technologies, whether we get into railguns, lasers. What areas are you really trying to focus, and what areas do you see emerging as the most effective leverage point for our industry going forward?
Sure. So our thesis is broken down into 3 buckets and then 13 sectors. And so think of the 3 buckets as computer software, computer hardware, and then advanced manufacturing. This is very important for our future when we talk about smart manufacturing or advanced manufacturing. And I'll give you maybe company examples of each one too, which might be helpful for the audience. So when we think about computer software, we obviously think about artificial intelligence. We think about next generation networks. We think about information security, which continues to be one of the largest buckets of investment capital that's being sunken into. And then something else too that we call bio horizons. This from a software perspective, I think AI is going to impact obviously healthcare and human performance in ways that we hadn't expected. And it's on the J curve, we're seeing not just technology advance at the steep end of the J curve, but we're also seeing healthcare advance at a similar rate and progress, which is super exciting, for us in the space. The second, when we talk about computer hardware, we think about, the power of compute. This is very, very important. We're seeing the battle between Grok, and we're seeing the battle between OpenAI and folks coming up with, with new chip solutions around, the power of compute. When it comes to hardware, we're also obviously talking about unmanned systems, autonomous everything. Mm-hmm. I think that there's the future is very clear that we will have an Army and a Navy and an Air Force and a Marine Corps that is autonomous everything. And so, this is a direction that our fund is focused on significantly. And when it comes to advanced manufacturing, we think about advanced robotics, we think about satellites and sensors. But the main thing, like one company example that is super exciting from the Series A and now the Series B, there's a company called Figure. And Figure is an advanced robotics company. Brett likes to talk about that we're giving AI a face. And this will probably be released after the announcement of this round, and the details have already leaked, but I don't want to be the one to say it before anyone else hears it. But the leads are compelling for this round of financing, and being a part of this since the Series A and a little bit before that with Brett and the team at Figure, I'm super impressed with what they've done. They built the same they built a humanoid robot in 8 to 10 months out the gate, and it took Elon 6 years to do the same thing. I think this company is remarkable. I think Brett's going to build one of the biggest businesses in the world, and I couldn't be more proud of the way that he's doing it. So even on our website at bv.vc, I take extra time to talk about Brett as a founder, because this is the exact thing I was just talking about. Right? When we talk about the ethics and morality of a founder, and you have someone out there that's building in the direction of, an $11 trillion TAM, that he's going to be, basically replacing low-skilled labor. The person who does that needs to have an ethical and moral compass, and Brett does. So again, the labor shortage in this country, to me, I see that as a national security issue. Advanced robotics, I see that as a national security issue. There are these pressure points that our country is facing right now, from housing to labor, to IT security, all these different things. To me, these are all part of a broad thesis of national security. It's not just making things that flap in the sky and don't come back. That's a very 20th century way to think about national security. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that helps.
No, absolutely. And you actually did a podcast with Brett or Brett, sorry.
Yeah, Brett. I did with Brett Adcock.
Brett. Yeah. And he dives into the details of the robotics. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head that not all national defense and national security is revolving around having things that attack a foreign enemy. A lot of it is creating a sustainable platform for the country to operate on, to where we're no longer threatened. It becomes that preventative aspect of, if we have that manufacturing base, if we have that technological base, if we have that creative base where we're just constantly iterating faster than everyone around us, we no longer become a viable target for other countries and other actors to want to go up against.
That's right. In our nation, we need to be unafraid about this for our allies. And I can tell you this too, our enemies and our adversaries are constantly, we're in this constant evolving game of measures and countermeasures when it comes to technology. And investors, we have to respond with big bets. We have to respond in innovative and entrepreneurial ways creating a long-term pipeline for our nation for things that will elevate us out of these existing defense and commercial markets. We have to build entirely new markets to handle what I always talk about as layered challenges. And at the end, ultimately, this is all about deterrence. We have to have so much technology that the rest of the world is deterred by the what if strategy of the United States. What if they have this? What if they do this? What if this happens? And now we have finally moved both the public sector and the private markets. We've turned both of their heads to each other, where the public markets are now valuing private markets in national defense and defense differently. So that changes people's perspectives, which is why I co-authored this study with William Blair, one of the who was an anchor in my first fund. It's an investment bank out of Chicago. Huge fan of folks at William Blair. They've been tremendously helpful. And what we found in this study was in early 2000, like around the year 2000, the average defense company was sold, merged, or acquired after a 20-year operating history, right? To either the big primes or even to larger commercial sector partners that focus on this type of technology. Now we're recognizing that those same defense companies are being acquired, merged, or bought within 4 to 6 years of their origin story.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a much faster. And it's because the primes do have a acquire to innovate strategy. They have prime as a partner. They have prime as a force multiplier. They're thinking about technology differently, just as the healthcare industry has evolved over the years. Johnson & Johnson, they buy more companies than they innovate in a new idea, right? So that they're all about acquisition, the large healthcare sector. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen across the defense industry as well. So it's highly lucrative.
Yeah, of course, especially in the venture space where you need to have that rapid turnaround for an exit. But how do you see us moving forward? Because I know we got into a bit of a deficit over the last 50 years or so as you've been offloading a lot of our manufacturing capabilities overseas. And obviously COVID was a huge eye-opening experience for our country to see that, even something as simple as cars, the chips aren't coming over here. So we don't have cars. And now all of a sudden used cars are more expensive than new cars almost. You couldn't get new ones. And we're seeing a lot of the chips going into our defense systems and other sides of the logistical train are coming to an all stop by offshoring a lot of this stuff. How are we going to convince businesses, and I know your Schoolhouse is probably in line with that type of stuff, convincing businesses to take a profit loss with investors in order to have the manufacturing capability here in the U.S. and we don't have that that linchpin in our system.
Yeah, so I don't know if I think about it. I might think about it a little bit differently. I think the companies that are building right now in the direction of national security, they're thinking about building things better, faster, cheaper. They're thinking about inventing and vertically integrating manufacturing differently. Yes, we need to build more manufacturing facilities here, but what will those look like? They won't look the same, and they shouldn't. I hope to God they don't. We should build more of what we need, to sustain things like ammunition pipelines and fulfilling, replenishing stockpiles and so on, which are depleted and does leave us vulnerable. But I hope that manufacturing the future, I hope that a kind of a defense-oriented hardware and or robotics company looks more like a Tesla factory than it does a GM plant, in a sense, where there's this combination of software and hardware in order for us to defeat our adversaries. And so when you walk the floor of a true advanced manufacturing company that's kind of up and to the right, when you get there early, it looks like the Home Depot section of kind of do it yourself. Right. And I just came back from visiting a company that's building swarm technology for kind of underwater autonomous vehicles. Right. So imagine, torpedoes, but in swarms, right? And so you go and see this company, and it literally looks like, the Home Depot section of do-it-yourself. And then you see the plans on where it's going, and it looks like a very sophisticated workshop, to build things very differently and at scale. Right. There's several early stage companies where when I go and look at the way that they're building and thinking about building, it has more to do with vertically integrating printing with the capability set, along with teaching operators how to actually do this on the ground at scale, versus having to go to, a major defense prime and pay $170,000 for one, when you can buy an integrated manufacturing system for $15,000, and that make these in mass quantity. So for me, the manufacturing facilities of the future are not going to look the same at all, and so we're actually operating at a significant profit margin versus a profit loss, according to the old way of things. But the founders that are building in this kind of generation are looking at mass producing things at scale, better, faster, cheaper, and then getting it out to customers much more quickly.
That makes a lot of sense as you're just revamping how we've been viewing the entire industrial base of the country. If you're able to essentially redesign it from the ground up, which I guess we're at a bit of an advantage then because we've offshored a lot of it, so we're not having to retool it. We can just start from scratch as we have companies like Figure to bring in robotics and
That's
just
right.
have a wholesale restart. With that, you mentioned the robots at Figure. You mentioned the swarm torpedoes. What technologies, what systems are you seeing on your end that you're most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. Founders are building remarkable things in almost every direction and sector. So to give you an idea of how we kind of manage the intake at the fund, we look at about 2,500 to 3,000 opportunities come inbound a year. And we take those and they have to pass like an initial test, which is slow. This initial filter is slowly being overtaken by some AI that we've created internally. So basically, there's three major buckets. It's, does this support first the special operations community, right, as a whole, right? Second, does it then impact the broader defense community? Third filter, are there commercial sector partners that matter most to our country's national security and our allies, where this technology could impact, right? So that's the first filter, and that usually gets it down, to a third, and then you move into some actual focused attention on this technology, and a small deeper dive that usually cuts it in half an hour at 500. Eventually, we get that bucket down to about 75 that we take very, very seriously, and then we'll invest in about 5 to 10 businesses a year, which is an aggressive position for a fund to take. And so by investing in anywhere from 5 to 10 companies a year, some are inception, some are seed, and then we will invest in an outside portco at the Series A, but we are highly concentrating our capital at inception to Series Seed. And so the builders that we see at this stage, it's really team oriented. And so for me, talking about the tech, of course, it opens up, a very broad conversation. But talking about the teams that are coming into this sector is far more exciting to me, because where folks used to go on the engineering side, looking to go into some Silicon Valley hotspots, are now choosing to build, and they're choosing to build in the direction of national security. And so to me, that's very, very exciting. Someone asked me about a headline that I would love to see on a pod I was on recently, and said, if there was one headline you could see tomorrow, what would it be? And then, she walked me through some of the headlines that other people have said on her show. And I was kind of shaking my head, and she's like, you're shaking your head, why? My headline would have to do with like, next generation of engineers and builders are passing up Silicon Valley polished brands to become builders in the direction of national security. That would be the best headline our country could ever see, that my children upstairs could ever have building on their defense. It needs to be sexy again to go build on behalf of NSA, CIA, Special Operations, our national security, our Department of Defense, and then, of course, the broader just base of what we have to do to secure our country. So for me, we're really looking at the early teams and that compilation of that early team. And even on our website, I don't talk necessarily about the founders, but I list our teams as teams. Like, we invest in teams at this stage. One individual founder will never make or break a company. They're pivotal. They're absolutely critical. So I'm not taking away anything from the founder CEO, but the founder CEO, the best ones, would tell you that I'm not going to do any of this by myself. And it only has to do with the teams around me. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that there's a founder market product fit. All right. There needs to be a founder product market fit, because you know this, both of you know this. When you build in the direction of national security, even with a focus on special operations, there are personalities that are not liked. There are personalities that will not get chosen for certain capabilities. There's a big emphasis on trust currency at our fund, right? There needs to be a basis of trust currency, not just with the founder, but with the founding team. And there's a little pie chart on one of my deck slides somewhere in my life where, I talk about the makeup of this founding team in the direction of national security. And one is kind of the technologist. The second is the operator, the person who is actually deployed technology out in the field, broke it, understands what's wrong with it and why it didn't work, and then most importantly, knows how to go around the system in order to get what they now need next. It's a very unique person, okay, to find. Mm-hmm. And then the third is not just the technologist and the engineer, not just the operator, but the person who has built something commercially for national security and sold it. All right. So those three personalities, when I go back to the success stories that we've seen, the $1 billion unicorns in the direction of defense, there's one thing that resonates and that's consistent across all of those examples. And it's those three personalities were there at the beginning to craft the 0 to 25 strategy, meaning who do we hire from 0 to 25? And then what culture was formed and birthed out of those first 25 personalities, because that's how culture's formed for national security. The first 25 makers, doers, builders show up and they start to form the initial fingerprint of the institution. From 25 goes very quickly to 50, from 50 to 150. And you have to imagine culture at these companies like a cement truck. This is an interesting analogy. When you watch a cement truck and you see the rotating cylinder that holds all of the cement, 0 to 25, that thing's turning, right? The culture's being formed, right? It's just, the more people you hire, the slower that thing turns. And when you get to 150, 50 to 150 is when it stops altogether. And so when I tell founders about culture, curation, we need to have the 5 driving forces set and in stone on the wall to poke at and point towards: vision, mission, values, principles, and ethos, because it will act as the initial talent filter for everything that comes in after the initial founder, initial founding team, and all the folks that slowly come on board. So if that filter's not there, you're going to let some toxic people in early, and toxic people early kill companies. And so this is how I think about it. We could sit here and talk about technology ideas and what I see on a day-to-day basis forever. But the trends are around talent, or for me, is what I've always focused on. You know this. I've always focused on talent, right? At the Honor Foundation, we transition talent from one career into the next great adventure of their life. When the pulse of that talent started to turn towards national security, NatSec technology companies, that's when I knew that this country was moving in the right direction again in regards to builders and doers, and why I wanted to create BVVC.
That's incredible.
So
I think
when you're investing in these companies that are at inception, how much, and I know that product market fit is a huge concern of your guys's, but how much of it is you guys just investing in the actual team? Is there, and are these founders, they obviously have like a specific skill set that they're coming to you. When you talk at inception, you're not at just ideation. This is people that have some work behind them and actually have some technical skills that can get the job done. So yeah, can you just talk to me a little bit about how you guys come down to those decisions and how much weight you guys place in the team aspect?
Yeah.
When you guys are looking to, yeah.
So great question. So at inception and seed, we place tremendous significance on the strength of the founding team. Never the founders alone. Like I said, the excellence of the individual does not define the excellence of the individual, meaning the founder does not define this, but it's in the way that initial team unites, right? How they blend their distinct skill sets and experiences to form what is very clearly a powerful collective of personalities, or what I love to call like an unstoppable force, right? In order to go up against an immovable object, which is that of creating a company, you need to have an unstoppable force. And then you have the unstoppable force that meets the immovable object. So for me, I have to bet on this collective that is a rare collision of expertise paired with a proven track record to execute on something. That is by far the next trait that I look for. A part of a founding team is, what have they executed on? And through that execution, what adversity did they come up against, right? And how do they accelerate towards outcomes? A startup needs to be this guided hurricane of activity in the direction of very specific outcomes. And then slowly over time, the hurricane turns into a sniper shot. But in the beginning, I want to know how they are moving this hurricane and accelerating towards outcomes, and how they think about those outcomes and why they chose those outcomes to be outcomes in the first place. So to say that, we place, and you said, it's about, market fit, that is way later. Like when I think about finding market fit, that's, series A to B, I'm not inception to seed. It's a deck and a team, and I listen very carefully to how organized the team is around the singular vision, meaning the end state that they hope to be at as a company. What are they building towards? The missions may change, the vision will always remain. And Kevin, you're a good example for this. I use this example often on the difference between vision and mission, because some companies have this confused for some reason. Vision, when you say I had a vision, that vision is of an end state, right? It's a vision. It's of an end state, right? Meaning something that you imagine. And the mission is what you do to get to that end state. So for instance, if I were to give a vision for the SEAL teams, the United States Special Operations community as a whole, we imagine a world rid of terror, right? That would be a vision. Imagine that, right? It's unachievable. It's unrealistic. We'll never get there. There'll always be malactors in the world, right? But it doesn't matter, because every day the SEAL teams get up to execute missions to go bring that vision into the world at all costs, to include their lives. So for me, I'm looking for this maniacal obsession trait that you'll see in Brett Adcock if you watch that podcast. He illustrates a trait that is maniacal and that is obsessive. There's a quick narrative. You talk about what I look for. There's a quick narrative that a storied investor from Sequoia went up to Seattle to visit with a founder. The founder's name was Bill Gates. And Mike gets into the car. That was the name of the investor at the time from Sequoia. And, he sits in the car and he noticed that the whole radio was pulled out of the center of the console. And, he's like, I don't know him well enough yet to ask about that. Like, he might've been robbed. I don't know the deal. And then he got to spend the day at Microsoft. And on the way back, Bill drove him back to the airport. And he finally, mustered up in conversation, like, hey, what happened to your radio? And Bill looks at him and goes, I found myself, listening to music and listening to the radio on the way to work. And I wasn't thinking about Microsoft. So I took it out. I ripped it out of my car and I got rid of it. And Mike was just kind of like, okay, got back to Sequoia and was like, we're investing in Microsoft. And we all know how that story turned out. So there is something about the maniacal nature of a founder, the obsessiveness, the disagreeableness, but at the same time, disagreeableness that can be worked with well with others. That's a tough trait to manage and understand in a leader. Who's someone who's so disagreeable that they can't be disagreed with, and then who's someone who's disagreeable and seeking out the best ideas, seeking truth, which is a meritocracy, right? We want the meritocracy, disagreeableness, looking for the best ideas, an idea meritocracy. That's what we're all seeking for, to the point where you also illustrate extreme followership, right? Where people still want to follow you. And that's, Brett is a good example of that. Many of my founders are great examples of that. But at the inception stage, you have a deck and you have a team. And I want to know how aligned that team is on that vision. And I want to know what they plan on doing every single day to get to the vision. And I want to know how they think about objectives and key results. So think of objectives, key results are the stepping stones, right? The guardrails into the lane lines, which is the mission that gets you eventually to the vision that you propose you can do. And then a lot of it's still instinct and pattern recognition, for sure. When it comes to the Inception series seed state of play. But backgrounds and track records are very, very important. Like I said, the skill set of execution. But just so you know, our fund has a very clear and distinct operating lens of diligence, where there's a qualitative lens of diligence and then a quantitative lens of diligence. At the Inception seed stage, you don't have a ton of quantitative diligence. You just don't. But you can do that on markets, and you can do that on, on macro environments and everything else. But it's still going to come down to that team, So that's what we really focus on. And I've developed a distinct set of questions that focus and poke and prod and kind of pick away at, some conversations internally that I have with the team. But I rarely have a founder alone conversation. I typically ask for the founder to be there with anyone they call a co-founder, or what I call critical stakeholders, meaning the business would fail if these people went away tomorrow or suffer greatly. I want all those people on the call with me. And that gives me an opportunity. This was developed, in part during COVID, because I had to meet with teams remotely. And so I had to see all 8 of the squares or 6 of the squares. And I had to see how they interacted with each other through an unusual line of questioning from the venture side.
So with that, going back to the maniacal obsession with these things, I'd almost attribute a lot of that to how you operate yourself. If you look through your history, you wanted to be a SEAL. You were dedicated to it. You got it. A spot to go to BUD/S. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. The body, I tell people all the time, BUD/S is like the NFL. You don't, or SEAL teams like NFL. You don't necessarily get the best people making it through. You get the ones that didn't get hurt, that didn't get whatever reason dropped along the way. There's a huge degree of luck associated with it, but then you're able to take that adversity, realign yourself with your next mission obsession that you're going to get involved in, and became helping special operators transition to the next space. You accomplish that mission beyond success, and that's still going on today. And you're able to say, all right, my mission here is done now. How do I, or what is next in line for me? And then you found the venture space. And I know you were originally more in the technology sector, not necessarily national defense. And then again, you rebranded, pivoted, and realigned with the national defense space. Can you talk about how upstairs in your Joe Muscleman brain, how you think through these things, how you find this niche? And you had probably thousands of conversations with special operators, and you had thousands of conversations with venture capitalists, and then thousands of conversations with founders. Like you have this way about you where you can just see a problem that most people haven't recognized and push through it. Can you talk through how that works with you and how you've been able to really capitalize on that?
Let me add on to that question too, Joe.
Sure.
I also want to know how you balance that with family. that maniacal nature, and then also be raising a 4 or 2 and having another one on the way? Because I think there'll be a lot of people that are be interested in hearing that as well.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. So to start with, you said it a few times, thousands of conversations, right? So after launching and successfully launching the first couple campuses at THF, I came to a realization that I'm not when things get to a point of copy, paste, repeat, I become uninterested to some degree. And when the foundation, after 5 years, got to the point where we were in 3-4 campuses, we clearly mapped out what it takes to launch a campus in a schoolhouse. Then it became an issue of, kind of repeat on repeat, right? And then what excites me is impact. So when you look at the numbers, there's 65, 70,000 members of the special operations community, and about 10,000 people transition annually. About 1,200 of those being specific to trigger pulling operators, and a lot of enablers surrounding those operators also get out. So look, those are not easy peasy numbers to create a high quality transition program that is 12 to 15 weeks long, that involves multiple campuses, both brick and mortar and virtual. And that impact can never be understated. But how do I do 1 million? How do I impact 1 million people? How do I impact 1 billion people? Instead of 40 fellows inside of a classroom, 40 founders inside of a fund could do that. And I don't do well advocating on behalf of me at all. I get super uncomfortable. It's not something I like to do. If I can, but I can advocate remarkably well for things that I believe in deeply to my core. And so the Honor Foundation gave me this maniacal obsession because I wanted to become a SEAL badly. I was the 20th man in my family to serve in the military, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, right? So it is deep in my blood to want to fight on behalf of this country. So how else can I fight on behalf of the country? Well, I was never meant to be a SEAL. I was meant to support them. So, okay, let's build something to support the community that I wanted to serve alongside. So the chip on my shoulder was great. It was very productive, highly productive. I was the perfect cocktail and mixture of vulnerability, insecurity, wanting to prove myself to a community that meant a lot to me, and hence the birth of the foundation and the maniacal nature that was behind me. 20-hour days would go like that. I wouldn't care. It's got to get done, right? And I really did look at it as life or death. If we do not create this, they may not find another mission, and that's crippling for communities like this. So for me, that's what drove me. Now, the next question that is also crippling, this brought the strongest men and women down to their knees throughout the history of the world. It's a 2-word question, and everyone listening has had this experience and has asked themselves this question in both work and life. Same with you two. And the question is, what's next? That question has brought more strength to their knees over the years and throughout history than any other 2 words combined. What's next? It's crippling if there's not a path, if there's not a trajectory. So when I made the transition from THF, I didn't know I wanted to go into venture at all. I had no idea what was next. I just dedicated my whole life and obsessive nature and tendencies and strengths to this one thing. But what I did know, and I typically tell this to folks who are asking themselves, pardon me, who are asking themselves this question, is it's the wrong question to ask at first. You should ask yourself, who do I like to work with, and who's doing something that inspires me? So if I were to look at that question, asking what's next, okay, well, who just inspired the hell out of me? Well, the top 0.001% warfighter on the planet, they inspired me. Okay, let's break down those traits, the attributes, the skills. What made them so great? What makes them so great? And then I created this body of attributes that I wanted to work with again. Well, it just so happens that I think everybody listening to this conversation, and especially you too, understand that there is a kinship in the exceptional way of thinking around a Navy SEAL and an operator and a technology founder builder. Now, one literally signs on a dotted line to give his life for our country. So I'm not comparing these two, but the other one kind of does that too, metaphorically. They sign on a dotted line, a metaphorical dotted line, to give their life all their social life, their family life, they all put it aside because they're trying to bring something about into the world that matters to them. So it was a body of skills and attributes of excellence that I wanted to find a parallel community that does that. And I went from the fellows at the Honor Foundation to the founders of the world. This is an exceptional 0.001% community because I want to work for them. I want to serve them, right? And that's what venture is, truly. At its core, I go out and raise money to then give it to founders that I believe are going to build some of the biggest businesses in the world. And I want to serve them. I want to advocate on behalf of them out into the world. So once I realized that translation of who I wanted to work with and who inspires me, it was VC bucket and it was entrepreneur bucket. So I didn't know if I was going to be an entrepreneur again or a VC. It turns out I wanted to be an entrepreneur VC. And then I started investing after raising, the first fund at 55 million, deployed it in 4 to 5 years or so. A third of those companies were national security. And then we wanted to go off and just focus on national security. So it wasn't so much as it certainly wasn't a pivot because I was already doing it since 2019. But what it was I didn't want to be a generalist VC anymore, right? Nothing about me or my life is general. Nothing about me and my life is unfocused. It's quite focused. So, okay, generalist VC, not for me. Hyper-focused on a niche of technology that will impact not just the United States, but our allies around the world. I can advocate the hell for that. And that's what I wanted to focus on.
It's an incredible journey. And how did you decide? 'Cause I know you went through a couple of name changes. You had, I believe it was Fulcrum was the first one, and then you went to Broom. And I remember the story with Broom. This is one of the stories that you always talked about at the Honor Foundation. With the New Zealand All Blacks and how each of them sweep out the locker room. It's all part of the deal. And so you wanted to have a community of founders who are willing to sweep out the locker room and do all the menial tasks as part of improving the whole general organization. And then you rebranded again. What was the inspiration behind making those changes?
Yeah. And so, by the way, Greg, I didn't answer your question about the family.
Oh, yes, please. Sorry. Please do get to that first.
Yeah. So let me, I apologize. The family orientation, I wouldn't be able to do anything at work well without my family as a fortress. So look, you're maniacal in the direction of your work. It's your life's work, right? Your work is your resume, and it'll always be that way as a legacy. But man, for those parents out there listening to this, like I have to keep saying I love you. Like if I don't get an I love you, Dad, back to my I love you to them, it's like there's like a void in my soul until I hear him say, love you, Dad. Because sometimes, they don't hear you or whatever. I'm like, I love you, buddy. And then like there's a pause. I'm like, hey, love you. And then he'll say it, right? So I need to get filled that way. And look, the way I do it is I'm just as maniacal when I'm in this office 7 to 7 every day. But when I go upstairs from 7 to 9:30, the 2.5 hours that I have with my family, and it's only an hour and a half with my kids before they go to bed, and then an hour to talk to Hannah about whatever the heck happened today and what the heck's going to happen tomorrow. And that's it. Right. And then from 9:30 to, midnight or so, or 11, I'm, answering emails, decorating, looking at different inbound and just trying to move the needle a little bit for the energy that I have left and specifically on the reading and writing. So I don't know. I don't think of it as work-life balance because at all. I think that's a horrible way to even talk about it. I do think of it as work-life harmony. I talk about that a lot. Where like if you're that maniacal at work, you have to be that maniacal with the time you have with your family. Just give them your undivided, centered attention and be present. That's all Jack wants to do. He wants to build Legos in the gym. He wants to, run around with lightsabers. And that's, there's no better way to close out a day than lightsaber battling with your son. Truly. But the work life, that's it, man. Like, so work-life balance is a horrible phrase to use and think of because even if I just worked a 9-to-5 job, right? The job I have is more 5 to 9, not 9 to 5. But if you do work a 9 to 5 job, you can't spend 8 hours with your family at the end of the day. So even an 8-hour traditional job, it's still not balanced, right? So it has more to do with harmony, and that's case by case. That's who your partner is, and who they want you to become, and who I want them to become, and then you start molding each other together. So hopefully that answers a little bit. That's a whole other pod conversation.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah. Moral of the story: be maniacal everywhere. Just live.
Yeah, the way you do anything is the way you do everything, and the how you are at work is I don't change that way when I'm with my family. That's exactly the same way. I wish I could be maniacal more around certain things in my life, but that to me is the harmony, like just physical fitness and keeping things on the calendar to make sure that when stress is going up, workouts need to go up too, right? And that often is in reverse order. When people get stressed out at work, they don't work out when it needs to be the opposite. And for me, I have found that to be absolutely true.
That's so true.
Oh man.
Yeah. Where do you see in 3 to 5 years, BVVC being? I know you want to be like the household name within the military side of the house, but what's the plans for 3 to 5 years from now?
I mean, look, I have like my on the wall, vision. And for me, it's 3 funds in 5 years. I only want to predict 5 years, and I will be maniacal at doing that. For me, I know all of that will come. I know that. I know that's going to happen. It's already in my mind. It's as good as done. What I care more about now is who comes along with this journey, because this is a very sensitive, meaningful, thoughtful, purposeful structure that we're building here at BV. And the people that come on board, they have to fit the culture that I've carefully constructed with words, action, and deeds to ensure that the folks come on fit the vision and mission and value set that we have as a fund. So the people scale is very exciting to me, and I have to hire for all of my deficiencies, right? So I have strengths, I have weaknesses, and I'm very clear on the weaknesses. So I'm looking for very specific talent to fill the gaps of not just myself, but my other partners. We'll be announcing the first partner hire next week. Other members of the team, former undersecretaries of defense, former members of the special operations community out of tier 1 units, like all these people, it's going to be a very different kind of misfit team. And I mean that almost as like we are misfits. Like we don't belong in the places that we're in, but it didn't make sense that a BUDS medical drop, honorable, discharged, E3 Deck Seaman would somehow create the Transition Institute for the Special Operations. That doesn't make any sense, right? I was a total misfit to that role. It didn't make any sense that someone without an investing background or investing track record or, having invested in anything outside of myself, my brain, my family, raised a $55 million venture strategy into this fund now, which is a much larger strategy. And I'll be in many, many more companies. So none of that makes any sense. But like what in life that ever seemed to be extraordinary made sense out the gate? It doesn't. And the best founders typically don't make much sense either. Some do, for sure, based on their track record and what they've done. Like, of course, like with Brett, it was very obvious to me. This is someone who is exceptional, and his track record proves it. And he was, $40 million of his own dollars in capital into the company before it even got off the ground. So he's all in. Like I want the all in mentality. And so, Kevin, getting back to your question, it was the generalist in me that was misaligned with the focus in me. So when you talk about coming in, and it was only one strategy, and it was a generalist strategy where a third of those companies were national security companies, and I led and sourced those opportunities. And so for our fund, I learned a ton about the types of LPs that I want to raise from. Right. Thing about venture, it's another thing about venture. It's the most holy, for me, the most holy, scintillating, active, No day is the same profession that I could have possibly have found that fits my personality and attributes perfectly. No day is ever the same. The only thing that's the same in my day is 9 to 12 is my personal work block every day, to include Saturdays and Sundays. And I am maniacal about holding and reserving that time to get my work done before I allow the world into my life to do and to be pulled in different directions. But that, workout time from 5 to 7 is mine. 7 to 8 is family. 8 to 9 is for chief of staff, and 9 to noon, that's my work. That's when I have to get my stuff done. So that the people that are relying on me on the team, they get and they hear back from me. But basically from 12 to 7, it's back to back to backs of other people's wants and needs. And that's why I got in the business, to serve the folks in my community. But think of it as strategy one was generalist. That didn't sit well with me. I am a very focused person, and I want to become a subject matter expert in a direction. And for me, I have a very natural background in fit and passion and love for national security. And so that's what, drove this into the fun strategy that I have now.
So I have to ask, and I know our time's getting short, but you mentioned something earlier, and it really piqued my interest, because I know a lot of people, successful people, deal with this. You just said it yourself, medically dropped budget student, E3, never been involved in investing, not heavily involved in national defense space. And now here you are running a 9-figure or an 8-figure fund in the national defense space with some of the preeminent tier 1 assets or tier 1 operators, federal government employees, secretaries of state and stuff like that. Or do you ever feel that imposter syndrome of, how is it me doing this, and am I the right person for this?
Yeah. So I know a lot of people struggle with that, mainly because society has concocted this term for us to think about and poke at and try to understand for ourselves. You're not an imposter for things, you're thinking about and imagining in your mind. So let me put it this way. I can only speak on behalf of myself. The phrase imposter certainly came into my mind with the Honor Foundation, but it was put there by other people, not myself. And so McCraven was actually a big part of this. I talked about this with him, and I said, sir, I'm hearing these things, and this is the first time we met in 2014. And he said this straight up, face to face, man to man. He said, Joe, you are, pardon me for the language, but he said, Joe, you are caring about the wrong fucking people. And I was taken aback. I wasn't expecting that. And I kind of came back to the question of like, well, sir, who are the right fucking people? And he said, I'm going to introduce you to some folks that you should pay attention to, right? These are the right people. And I became maniacal about what these people care about. If this man, who's been a part of this for nearly 35 years, tells me that I should care about these people, I'm going to care about those people. And so I did, and I shifted all my attention and my focus and my effort, and most importantly, my energy and emotion, to how these people were giving me feedbacks. And it turns out they were the greatest leaders in the community. And so they never gave feedback, right? What they did is, this is why I never use the term feedback. Nobody likes feedback. If you look at the definition of feedback, the audio definition, it means a loud, irritating noise, right? So for me, I don't want feedback. What I like and what I came up with at the time was the way these people would treat me and critique me was very iron sharpens iron. They made me feel like they had my best interests in mind. They made me feel like they were trying to sharpen me. They were like a whetstone. And most importantly, the way they made me feel was that I didn't feel anything. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The best leaders I've ever experienced, the best mentors and coaches, and those are two different things, mentors and coaches, they didn't make me feel anything. They didn't make me feel angry. They didn't make me feel happy, right? They kept me centered on the critique. Do you know how hard that is? And so when I find people that can give me critiques without making me feel off-centered in any way, I latch onto those people like you can't imagine. Because A, I want to be like that, right? I want to be like them when I get older. And I want to make sure that any critique that I give is a critique and not feedback, which is a loud, irritating noise that nobody really likes. So I would rather act as an iron sharpens iron, a critique for someone, and be very specific in what I'm giving a critique around so they have the opportunity to sharpen it and become 1% better, right? I'm not asking for big changes. No one can make big changes. How hard is it for you to make big changes for you? And we ask this of other people all the time. That's crazy. 1%. I want 1% critique in this direction. And by the end of the year, we're going to see if 1% was achieved. And we know through bodies of research that if you tell someone to focus on something, just 1%, it actually has an average of 18 to 25% a chance of improving just by focusing on that one thing. So I don't think when McCraven told me that, I started to pay attention to the right things. And all of a sudden, the imposter syndrome went away because I was focused on people who were giving me rock solid critiques. Now, this is the second part of your question. Once you've built something from nothing, you know you can. That's dangerous. All right. So I had to be very careful about what I allowed into my brain, what I allowed to focus my creative energies on, because these things take years of, this is the point of TLC Equation. A founder has a vision. You can't shake it. You can't unsee it. Right. So when I'm looking at founders, I'm looking for how long, when did you first incept this idea? What did it look like? And what did it taste like? What did it smell like? Where were you? Who was around you? Right. Because once you had that, it usually takes years for that to come into reality. And then once you start professing the vision over and over and over again, you attract what? You attract missionaries, right, to the vision, mission. When you have a collection of missionaries, you now have a collection of values, shared values, vision, mission, values, right? That's the first part of the equation. And then they start to talk about these things to the 10x power. So the whole point of, imposter syndrome, it's always put on us by others. It's never ourselves. No one who's doing more than you will ever throw stones at you. You ever notice that? Like, that's just not how it works.
It's so true.
It's just not how it works. People doing more than you will not be throwing stones at you. And if they are, then you like, hey man, that's a compliment coming from you. All right. Elon Musk or anyone in the technology space ever critiques me as an investor. Oh, great. That's amazing.
I'll happily take that.
Awesome. I'm glad I'm on the radar. Thanks for that, extra nudge. So I think people that think about imposter syndrome are thinking about it because other people are thinking about it more. And then it starts to sink in that, wait a minute, am I supposed to be here? I don't want anyone listening to this to think that they cannot do anything. I think people need such little encouragement to go do extraordinary things. Whether you're a single mother or whether you're just trying to start a business, they don't need much, right? So I'd much rather people listen to this and say, there's really nothing that you cannot do. And there's extraordinary sets of circumstances that have to be in line for you to do it. But my God, what if all of us, the classic man in the arena speech, right? Well, what if we all were in the arena? What if we all felt that way? I think that's something that's totally different. And I think the American spirit would be kind of reborn again in a new direction for builders and doers in this country if we had more builders and doers in this country. And so that's going to save America, is the cohesion of that mindset and spirit. It has everything to do with remembering our roots and where we came from and how this country has become what it's become for the world.
Absolutely. Joe, I really appreciate that perspective on imposter syndrome, because I know so many guys feel that, whether they're former SEALs, whether they're professional athletes, whether they're founders, very successful, driven people who, much like what you're talking about with the what next question, they just fall subject to that projection of, if I'm thinking about other people, they're probably thinking about me. And so am I really the right person for this job? So having someone who's been as accomplished as you have with everything you've done, just been success after success after success, to hear how you've been able to manage those thoughts and really reframe it into a positive spin. I think is extremely helpful for a lot of guys as they're transitioning out and realizing that you have these skills. Don't worry about what everyone else is thinking. Focus on what's important to you, and find those 1% improvements to really drive forward into your next mission. So I think that's a great way to end this conversation. Is there anything else you'd want to put out there with the things you have going on, the Schoolhouse, the podcast, the venture firm, anything you'd like to talk about as we close out?
No, I just want to tell people to go build, do more, learn more, and build more. The country needs you to go build.
Well, thank you, Joe. You've been an absolute pleasure to speak with. You always have incredible pearls of wisdom and are inspiring to pretty much everyone around you. I know I've been in awe of everything you've accomplished over the years, and I look forward to our continued friendship.
Thanks, man. Same to you, Greg, and Kevin. Always. Thank you for putting on this production for folks to listen and learn.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you.
You got it.